The divine dance. When you learn to accept yourself and your partner unconditionally, co-creation becomes possible. Then, in helping your partner, there's no betrayal of self. Instead, there is an expansion of self-consciousness that includes your partner's needs and interests. Then the desire to please him or her other is no longer at the expense of yourself. A relationship of this kind is a new psychological entity. It is no longer I and you, it is us. And this us is greater than the sum of its parts, yet at the same time dependent on the ongoing functional integrity of the parts. If either person were to begin to betray self, the unity consciousness of us would disintegrate. Moreover, us has its own life mission, made possible by the joining together of two individuated persons. That mission cannot be accomplished by either person acting separately. It can be accomplished only by the two listening together. The commitment of the couple to each other creates the environment in which their shared gift can be nurtured and given to the world. This gift is rarely understood or brought to maturity. That is because most couples marry before they know who they are as individuals. They have not yet looked at their childhood wounds or come to conscious ownership of the fears and defense mechanisms that push away love. They have not explored their feelings of despair, inadequacy, and powerlessness. They have not found their faith or their purpose in life. While it is possible to do this inner exploration within the context of a lifelong partnership, it is rare. Having projected their parental issues on their partners, most couples choose to separate from each other in order to individuate. It is a moot point that such separation from parental authority should have happened for both people prior to marriage. For most people, it simply doesn't. When individuality doesn't happen in a person's 20s or 30s, it often happens at mid-age. After a divorce, people learn to face their shadow side and own it. They learn to tell the truth to themselves and others. Thus, they bring greater honesty and integrity to their new relationship. As difficult as a divorce may be, it does represent a second rite of passage, a kind of psychological rebirth in which the individual learns to embrace herself again more deeply than ever before. No longer needing to please others at all cost, she affirms the truth about herself and lets go of what is false. She enters a process of ascension in which she learns to bring her true self to the altar of relationship. Not knowing. What we know limits our experience. It prevents us from being open to what we do not know yet. If our self-esteem is tied to what we know, we will feel personally threatened whenever our perceptions and worldview are challenged. Since we do not know all there is to know about anything, our lives are constantly presenting us with evidence that can broaden or deepen our knowledge. If we have an open mind, we are willing to learn as we go along. We understand that what we don't know is far greater than what we do know at any moment in time. We also appreciate the fact that much of what we take for truth today may be overturned by new evidence and experience tomorrow. An open mind is a humble one. No matter how firmly convicted we are in our beliefs, we are willing to concede that there is another way of looking at things. By seeing that there are many possible interpretations of what happens, we can hold our own interpretation with flexibility and a sense of humor. We know that ours is not the only way to understand or perceive a situation. Indeed, our perception and our experience, while appropriate for us, may not be appropriate for others. Having an open mind means that we are generous and compassionate with others. We respect their perceptions and experience, even if they are very different from our own. We understand that we can love and respect others and still disagree with the way they perceive the world. To have humility is to understand the limits of what we know, to understand that there is a point beyond which we do not know. The humble person sees what she knows as a handful of sand, and what she doesn't know as the remaining sand on a beach that stretches out for miles. What we don't know is always larger than what we do know. This includes what we know about ourselves, what we know about others, and what we know about the world. To realize that we know very little about anything does not denigrate what we do know. It just helps us hold that knowledge of a more flexible and compassionate way. It helps us hold that knowledge not as a weapon which we can use to beat others, but as an invitation to dialogue and mutual discovery. Conceit and intellectual pride stand in the way of our awakening. They short-circuit our learning process. When we are hung up on what we know, we forget that we don't know very much at all. We begin to take ourselves far too seriously, and that means that we have fewer friends, more struggle, and less peace of mind. Our need to be right in itself is an admission of egocentricity and self-righteousness. One who needs to be right rarely is, and when he is, it is at a great price to himself and others. If we want to live in a more peaceful way, we must recognize our need to be right as a sign of intellectual immaturity and emotional weakness. It does not serve our need to grow or be nourished in our relationships with others. The ability to say, "I do not know," without feeling unworthy is a sign of spiritual maturity. When we say, "I don't know," we release our attachment to what we do know. And when we release this attachment, what we do know is either quietly confirmed for us or gently corrected. Not deciding for others. Perhaps the most important "I don't know" we can utter is in response to someone else's request for feedback or advice. Of course, it's always flattering to have someone ask for our opinion about something. But if we offer our opinion without being clear that it is our own experience and interpretation, and that it may not work for that person, then we have not acted in a responsible way. And if we don't act responsibly now, the responsibility will come back to us later. When someone asks for my advice, the responsible thing to say is, "This is what has worked for me, but I don't know if it will work for you. I can't even be sure that it will work for me the next time I try it." When I say "I don't know" in that way, it tells others you are responsible for what you believe and what you decide. So please consider it well, listen to me and listen to others, but most importantly, listen to yourself. You are the one who will make the choice and live with it. Many people try to get us to agree with them or confirm their way of thinking. Our agreement seems to give their decision a sense of legitimacy. But what they are doing is asking us to become an authority for them. If we become the authority, then whatever happens, good or bad, is our fault. If it is good, we are put on a pedestal. If it is bad, we are crucified. People who ask us for confirmation of their decisions are having difficulty taking responsibility for their own choices. Conversely, when we have a pattern of being an authority figure for others, we often live vicariously through others and postpone the decisions we must make in our own lives. When one person is an authority for another, neither is responsible for his or her own life. Our willingness to be an authority for others and to let them be an authority for us is more common than you might think. If you want to know how this applies to you, ask yourself, how often do I make my own decisions and encourage others to do the same? When we say "I know," we are saying that we are an authority for ourselves, if not for others too. When we say "I don't know," We are clear that we cannot be an authority for anyone else. Indeed, we recognize that we cannot be an authority even for ourselves, for what has been true for us in the past may not be true for us now. Liberating ourselves from false responsibility for the thoughts, feelings, and actions of others is an important first step in the awakening process. Liberating others from our own habitual thoughts, feelings, and actions is an important next step. Dismantling the authority of the ego. What we believe and therefore energize in our lives comes from what we have experienced in the past. It is no wonder that we continue to experience the same lessons over and over again until they make us thoroughly sick and disheartened. If we want to have a different experience, we must have a different belief about ourselves. That is easily said, but not so easily done. Before we can have a different belief about ourselves, we must undo or neutralize the beliefs we already have. The best way to do this is to realize that they are just beliefs. They are not objective fact. Beliefs appear to be true, not because they necessarily are, but because we are invested in them. Our emotional investment in these beliefs is the creative force in the manifestation process. As we believe, so do we act. These beliefs may be right or wrong, or a little of both. It doesn't matter. We create our life based on what we believe, regardless of how true or erroneous our beliefs are. Reality unfolds in a way consistent with our beliefs so long as those beliefs are mentally clear and emotionally strong. When our beliefs are not clear and strong, things do not work in the way we think they should. When there is an apparent conflict between what we want to happen and what happens in our life, we can usually trace this conflict to our own inner ambivalence. Inner ambivalence. That's a hard word to say. Ambivalence is a sign that our beliefs no longer serve our growth and transformation. Sometimes in our psyche no longer buys our, I spelled something wrong there. Sometimes in our psyche we no longer buy our old pictures and solutions. New solutions and pictures may not have come yet, but the old ones are now being questioned, whether consciously or not. Outer conflict and inner ambivalence go hand in hand. Both are a sign of transformation at work in the psyche. Old beliefs no longer hold our allegiance, and so our external life, which was built on the firm conviction of those beliefs, begins to fall apart as those beliefs shift from within. An earthquake has begun in the psyche. The ground trembles and edifices we have built upon it begin to sway. Glasses fall off the shelves. Furniture is unended. In some cases, even the most fundamental of our beliefs may begin to crack. This external crisis is simply a rejection of our crisis of belief. We no longer believe as we used to. What we were sure about in the past is no longer a sure thing. What was black and white is now unfolding in various shades of gray. Insecurity within, revolution without, each filling the other until we lose track of which came first. Mistakenly, we think the outer is the cause of the inner. This is a convenient fallacy that delays our having to take responsibility for what's happened in our lives. In fact, every major quake in our external lives can be traced back to a few tremors of uncertainty in the psyche. Most of what we build in our lives will be reduced to ashes and dust. That is inevitable. What the mind creates must eventually be destroyed to make room for its new creations. All forms age and become obsolete. All buildings, no matter how painstakingly maintained, eventually decay and fall apart. There comes a point where the basic structure becomes untenable and cannot be repaired. Beliefs, too, are gradually undermined from within. They become weak, porous, overly stressed and stretched. Some develop gaping holes, which are obvious to others, but a mystery to us. When our house falls down around us, we are the most surprised. What's obvious to our friends is often completely beyond our understanding.